Yeah. Hey, Mickey, keep on road for later, yeah? Eyes low, blazing OG, you know me, the young trendsetter, force with me like Kenobi.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I can get so stuck in my own head about where to go next on a project that it can be a bit paralysing. For example, the camshaft on the KE25 is now dialed in, so it's time to put it back together. But I need to replace the studs on the timing case with bolts, and while I've got it off the car, I might as well clean it up. But to clean it, I need to put it in my Ultrasonic. But someone accidentally left a chip of steel in here, and now the water's rusty. So now I'll have to clean the Ultrasonic. But then once the timing case is clean, the aluminium tarnishes pretty easily. If it's clean, I might as well paint it. Then once it's back on the car, I don't really want to put the ugly rocker cover back on as well, so I might as well do the same process with that. Now when that's looking good, I also don't want to put the clutch fan back on the car, because this little engine needs all the horsepower it can get. So that means fitting a Thermofan, which I'll have to size and buy. Then once I've bought it, I'm going to have to work out how to mount it and wire it up. If I'm going to go to the effort of running all new wiring for the fan, I might as well fix up the dodgy wiring from my starter motor that's been in the car since I bought it. And also prepare for the wiring of the MSD ignition, which I already decided was going to have the 2-step wired in as well, so I'll need to sort the latching relay for that while I'm at it. In which case I'm going to need some sort of switch panel, and I've had this idea to tidy up my custom heater control panel in the car for ages. So I might as well finalise that design and actually make something interesting. And that's why I'm in the car right now, obviously. I need to grab out my V2 of the switch panel so that I can make V3. Alright, let's start with the Ultrasonic. I was smashing through cleaning up a bulk lot of drills and miscellaneous things I bought a while ago. Then I think a small couple of chips had fallen through the mesh here, and then I left it for a few months, and here we are. While I put the pressure washer out, I figure I might as well give some of the drills I left to wash too, and some of the dirt off the KE70. And the pressure washer. Is that like feeding chicken to a chicken? Don't do that. Animals are friends. Anyway, back to the KE25. This is where I left it in the last video. If you haven't watched that one yet, please do. They take me ages. The cam's nicely dialed in, 0.6mm of lift at 22 degrees before top dead center, and I couldn't be more happy with this 3D printed timing wheel. I think I'll just tweak the design slightly, then I might put them up for sale on my website. Let me know if you're interested. As I mentioned at the start of the video, it's good practice to change the studs on these timing cases to bolts, because if you don't, and you want to remove the timing case like I have here, you'll have to completely unbolt the entire sump to remove it. Not ideal. I'll remove the old gasket, and while I'm very tempted to just slap some gasket sealer on it when I put it back on, I've already ordered a gasket kit, so I'm sure that'll arrive before I need to fit it anyway. Eventually when I fit the adjustable cam gear, I'd also like to modify one of the timing cases so that I can get easy access to it and I don't have to go through this process as well, but we're here now and this is what we're doing. The Ultrasonic is looking snazzy with just a little condensation.
Previously on condensation.
Ellen, there's moisture on the outside of my glass.
It's condensation, Johnny.
I previously have been using demineralized water, whose main purpose I believe is to avoid water spots on the surface of the parts, but seeing as I'm going to be putting in some pretty dirty stuff in here anyway, I'm sure tap water will be fine for now. So I'll load up a few parts that need cleaning, and while this is running, I'll get back to tidying up some of the things on the engine. The rockers are always a bit of a pain to get back on the car. I'm sure there's a better solution than what I'm going with here, but this is what's happening today. Also triple checking that the rods are properly seated on the lifters as well as the rockers before cranking down on it. But not too much cranking. Ever seen one of these before? It's called a torque wrench, gives you more finite measurement than ugga-duggers. Seeing as I've got it in my hand, I think it's best to torque down everything that catches my eye so that I don't forget, like the cam bolt for example. These have come up amazingly well. As you see them is basically how they came out of the Ultrasonic. I gave them a rinse with water and then hit them with a tiny bit of brake cleaner to get the last of any spots that were missed. Although I am tempted to really clean these up and remove things like this, I've also got to draw the line somewhere, so here's the line. Also, my setup area for painting isn't very camera friendly right now, so you can just imagine that I use this heat gun like this for a bit. Did a little spraying, a little more heating, a little more spraying, a little more heating, and here we are. While this water is looking pretty gross, I might as well chuck some of my dirtiest parts in here. So here's another timing case off one of the other spare engines. And if you watch my Instagram or shorts, you would have seen me prepping this water pump.
Ready for war, Joe? How you wanna blow these spots?
But now that I'm fitting a Thermofan, these studs are too long for just the pulley, so I'm going to switch them to bolts. The threads also don't seem to be great, so I might as well clean them up while I'm here. And now onto the radiator. You'll notice that from factory, radiators have rubber mounts and don't hard mount to the chassis. This is due to a thing called galvanic corrosion, and if you were to join them uninsulated, you'd create a galvanic cell. The electrical system grounds through the radiator and your coolant will start to rust things, basically. I designed some insulating stoppers to mount the radiator back onto the chassis, and I thought I had a factory fan shroud that I could use to mount the thermo in, but turns out it's from another radiator. But I'll work out a design for a nice fan shroud soon anyway. This core is also looking a little worse for wear, but remember what I said about not getting carried away? It's fine for now. I love removing tape after something is finished drying, and I reckon these are looking pretty good. I'm still not sure how I feel about the wrinkle black to be honest, but I like it more than the tarnished aluminium, so it'll do. You saw me clean the gasket earlier as well, but turns out I had a new one sitting in the drawer, and upon comparing them, it's much better. So I'll fit that one instead. Same as the top rubbers as well. Unfortunately, I only have these nuts to secure it for now, and I think I'll get some domed ones. So here's a little trial run of the setup for the wiring of the Thermofan. It may look familiar if you've watched my other short video on the wiring of the two-step. I reckon it's one of the greatest travesties that this 1974 Corolla didn't come with launch control, and I don't reckon there's any way I can beat Dom without it. As I've said, two-step is a feature on this MSD ignition that I'm installing. There are lots of ways that you can wire this up, but I figure let's make it cool. The concept is pretty simple. Two-step is essentially a secondary rev limiter that you can activate for launching. Whilst the concept is simple, before I get too deep, I thought I'd set up a bench test to make sure it's all going to work as intended. You can see this momentary switch here will activate a relay, which will remain active until the car is launched. I obviously didn't invent this concept. It's called a self-latching relay, and it's been used by racers for a long time. Here's a quick demonstration of how that works. You can see that pressing the switch does nothing unless the clutch is engaged. When it is, two-step is activated. Then once you launch, by taking your foot off the clutch, you break the earth and two-step disengages, allowing you to rev the car as you would normally. It's the same setup, just without the latching loop. To be honest, I'm never really sure what level of detail to go into with these videos, so if you want some more info on the setup, let me know in the comments. But as we can see from the trial run here, everything is working perfectly. The only thing missing is a temperature switch, but that's on order and it won't affect the rest of the design from here anyway. So I'd probably better sort out a mounting solution for the shroud. Here's something I prepared earlier. Originally in my head I was just going to use a 3D print as a way to test the design and then get something water jet cut, but then I thought about all the people who constantly whinge in my comment section about plastic in the engine bay, yet this entire fan itself is in fact plastic, and I figured why not just print something and see how it goes. I often start a design like this with simple pickup points that I can then print out and test with paper. This mainly serves to save time with printing, as the LaserJet printer is a few orders of magnitude quicker than an FDM printer. From there, I often prototype in a cheap, forgiving material like PLA, again to save on time and cost while I'm still playing around with things. Now that I'm pretty happy with the design, I'm going to print from ABS and see how it goes. Worst case scenario, I can just print from a more suitable material, otherwise I do have a pipe dream of having my mill running so that I can make some more intricate parts. So for the actual design of the switch panel, you can see what my original idea was, but I was never really too keen on the way I'd incorporated the two-step button. I much prefer an OEM Plus styling, and these just don't suit the period of the vehicle. So with that in mind, I decided to do what is hopefully a final redesign, and keep with the original styling of what would have been around in 1974. The factory dash illumination is green, basically the same as you can see here with the indicators, and so I'd like to incorporate that into the switches as an indicator light for when they're active. In my model here, obviously I'm yet to finalise how I'll mount the lamps. I have a couple of ideas in mind, but I need to make sure that everything else is going to work first so that I have an idea of what space I have to work with. The fan and fuel switches will both be permanent on-off switches, while the two-step and start switches will both be momentary. I also spent way too long modelling these, so please take a second to appreciate them. So back to what I was saying, normally using a momentary switch would mean that the circuit would only be powered when the switch is held on, and that's what we want for the starter motor, but obviously we have added the two-step circuit to include the latching loop so it stays on until the car is launched. Back to the design process, you can see here that I took inspiration from the factory toggles that were already present and enlarged them to suit my vision of some more prominent tactile switches. I actually think this is going to be pretty cool. I'd like to cover it in more detail in a future video when I've progressed further with the design. Remember how I mentioned that gasket kit I ordered? Well, it arrived, and so did this, which is a timing case oil seal. I mainly bought the other kit for the sump and paper gaskets, but I'd actually already purchased this separate oil seal beforehand, which is a little annoying as the gasket kit was $50 and the oil seal alone was $35, but this one's black, so I'll pretend like that was my plan all along. I'll give the paper gasket a spray on both sides with the jointing compound, hammer in this bad boy, and then it'll almost be ready to go back on, except for these that I forgot about. You're familiar with the process by now, but I'll go chuck these in the Ultrasonic so I can clean them up. While I wait for that to run, I've had this bad boy sitting in the garage for literally over 6 months without use, so I think it's time that I actually do something with it. This can't be real life. It's in my pocket. It's been a long day. The Ultrasonic has done a great job as always, and I'll just use the brake cleaner to speed up the process of getting into these really built up areas for the last of it. And through the magic of editing, the print is now completed, and I think I'm pretty happy with it. You'll note the bowing of the flex plate here in the clip. Let me know in the comments if you think you might know why that is. If there's enough interest, I can make a video detailing some more 3D printing tips for this sort of thing as well. It'll certainly do the job while I organise a few other bits and pieces, and I have plans to get a few other things water jet cut as well anyway, so I'll likely put a couple of these on the list at the same time as well. However, for now I think the design is solid, everything fits as I intended it to, and I'll swap this PLA prototype for the ABS version. Before I mount this up though, I'm going to continue to get my money's worth out of this M6 tap. Alright, now we're good. And this actually blends in so well with the radiator, I reckon it practically looks better than factory. I'll tidy up the wiring here when I'm ready to hook it all up, and probably remove that sticker as well to keep it all looking stealthy. During an aimless walk through Bunnings, I decided to grab some domed nuts, and while I like them more than the ones that were there, I don't love the black. I'm going to swap these for some chrome ones I think, but they'll do for now. Onto the mounting of the timing case, I decided to hit the surface with some 400 grit, which I probably should have done before I painted it, but it's more for peace of mind than anything else. I then cleaned both the case and the backing plate with some wax and grease remover. This Hylamar just helps with adhesion of the gasket. You saw me use it in that water pump video I mentioned earlier and that you went and watched, remember? I believe best practice for this is to mount the crank pulley at the same time as the timing case and seal, so luckily that was my plan anyway. And while I really should remove this sump and replace the gasket, I also really don't want to, and like I said, I've got to draw the line somewhere. The sump will need to be removed soon in order to weld on a bung for the turbo oil drain anyway, so I'll address that problem then. Now that the front of the case is secure, I might as well tighten it down and torque the crank pulley to spec before I get distracted and completely forget about it. The whiteout is for the TDC timing mark, and it will allow it to show up clearly when using the timing light. Now that I can be sure about the position of the pistons and cam relative to one another, I also should now be able to position the distributor appropriately as well. As you can see, it's close to 180 degrees out here, so I'll swap that around while I'm here. Take note of this little slot on the distributor while we're here, because at this moment right now, I'm thinking about how I should remove it, and yet I don't. And we'll see the consequence of that soon. What you see me doing here is turning the oil pump, which the distributor keys into, because we need to make sure both those and the teeth on the cam are all in the position we want. Noting the issues that drove me to begin this cam timing process in the first place, although these plugs are brand new and I've already gapped them, I'll clean them and check the gaps again before reinstalling them. The carburetor jetting hopefully shouldn't be too far off, all things considered, and although it'll likely still need some tweaking, I think it should be fine to get the car up and running. I won't bore you with the install of these, suffice it to say I would never recommend doing this with the engine in the car, especially without a hoist. It's an absolute drainer. So now, cam timing's done. Timing case has had studs replaced for bolts, been cleaned, painted, and the crank seal replaced. Rocker cover has been cleaned, painted, and seals replaced. Radiator has had custom insulators 3D printed to prevent galvanic corrosion. Clutch fan has been removed and replaced with a Thermofan, which has had a custom mount designed and 3D printed. And while I'm pretty stoked on the CAD design and 3D printed prototypes of the new switch panel, there shouldn't be anything else stopping the engine itself from running. So let's test that. I said to myself 100 times I would cut this annoying slot off the distributor before replacing it, and of course I didn't, and of course now I need to. I didn't include a lot of shots of this because, to be perfectly honest, I was going insane by this point. So the car finally started but wouldn't run properly and the spark seemed inconsistent. So troubleshooting some easy things, the only not new parts were the distributor leads, so I swapped them from the KE70 and it was much the same. And then I was thinking, surely it couldn't possibly be the brand new coil. Could it? Of course it could. Of course it could. Did I leave the ignition on and burn it out? Maybe, I guess. Or is it like every time I order food in a restaurant and they forget my order? Just a brand new faulty item. I'm going to say that because it couldn't possibly be something that I've done.
I mean, like, they took our jobs.
They took our jobs?
Yeah.
Oh my god. They took my job! They took your job!
Do you not watch South Park?
No.
How? That's your homework. It's your homework for the weekend. All of South Park. All 25 years.
I've already fixed the Corolla finally.
Wow. I don't know. Also, I don't like that tone, Mr. Cressida, that's been sitting for 3 years. It's running cars only in here, mate. And just in case you might have been wondering if it was just my eBay special multimeter that was reading incorrectly, here's a comparison with a big boy one, as well as a brand new solid coil. If you're not quite sure what you're looking at, it's the resistance of the coil, and as you can see by the sub 1 ohm value of the solid coil, mine's cooked. Ideally being now that I'm using the electronic distributor, I'd be using one of these anyway, so every cloud has a silver lining, right? Luckily the changeover of the coil was super simple. Bosch even supplies 2 types of right angle brackets for mounting, so now it's just time for some new plugs. I gapped these ones to 0.9 and I'll put the original leads I had back on as well. Safe to assume that due to the inconsistent sparking, the plugs quickly became fouled, which would have then further contributed to the lack of spark. Before I put them in though, these 90-degree intake manifolds are notorious for collecting fuel, so I'm going to blow it all out and hopefully pass the cylinders as much as possible to prevent flooding. This is another contentious thing for people, but steel plugs in an alley head are always going to get some anti-seize from me. Should I put the choke on? Well, I've got to say, this has been a saga, but I finally feel like I'm at a point now where I'm moving forwards instead of backwards. And while all of this has been happening, I've also replaced the clutch in the Stagea. Ask me about that one. That's a whole other saga in itself.
So annoying.
Prepped a few things for the Turbo KE70 project. And since so much time has passed between beginning this episode and now, I've actually made quite a bit more progress on the switch panel. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below what you thought, and if there's anything you might like to see more of. I have got a few ideas for the upcoming videos, and I've almost finished a couple of them, so you should see some more regular YouTube videos. I do post a little bit more frequently on my Instagram though, so check that out as well. See you in the next one.
Pressure put in our seeds to get straight A's. I know I was rushing home just to get straight blaze. You know the age, naivety, frustration, and rage. Suicide rates constantly raised, and I'm amazed. Graduating, maybe you can work the rest of your life. Education forcing dreams and aspirations aside. Y'all get the picture. These kids are falling victim to a system, raising money hungry in a food scarce prison. And when that prison is the building blocks for a whole generation, it takes someone great to instigate some separation. Know what I'm saying? So stand alone, fucking stand tall, dog. You can always get up higher than you fall, dog.